It's always fun when we get an oddball system into the shop, and today we got a Nintendo Virtual Boy. These suffer from a ribbon cable problem that goes to the LED array for the vision, for the screens, but it's not a standard screen. So while there's a lot of fixes out there on the internet for this, a lot of them are less than recommended. So I'm going to show you how to safely and properly fix the problem. So stick around. Hey, welcome back. Today on the bench we have my favorite Nintendo mistake. This is a Virtual Boy. These were built in '94, as I recall, and they didn't even make it an entire year out on the market. They pulled them in less than a year. And as I recall, they only sold about 700,000 of them worldwide, which by Nintendo's standards, that's a pretty poor showing. So anyway, this one came to us because the Virtual Boy suffers from a problem with its video system. Inside, basically there's two sets of video chambers. There's a left and a right screen. There's an oscillating mirror, and those optics go in and out to adjust pupil distance and focus. And there's a pair of ribbon cables that go down to an LED array on each side. And the problem is over time, as those went in and out, the ribbon cables would simply separate from the LED arrays. So pretty much any one of these that you come across, unless if it's already been repaired, is going to suffer the same issues. The real problem is these ribbon cables weren't even soldered to the LED arrays. They were just bonded. So there's a couple ways that people have fixed them over the years. Some drastic, some just not very, some very poor judgment in the way it's done. And unfortunately, one of the ones that I think is very poor judgment is one that seems to be very popular to try. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But first things first, let's verify which side is on and which side is off. The owner said one side was working and one side wasn't. We're going to go ahead and perform the procedure on both sides just to make sure everything stays good. So right now, all right, our right side's working just fine. Our left side is completely dead. Okay, so we know that. So let's go ahead and get into this. The controller has a battery pack built into the bottom. There was also a power cord that could be had. And our stand is just a clip. You squeeze it and it comes off. I'll put that aside for now. And finally, we can pull off our shield. Now this one is in extremely nice condition. There we go. This one's in extremely nice condition, and this is an aftermarket shield, but our stand is the factory stand. Most of the time, if you find one with a factory boot, the viewer boot, they're in pretty rough shape. So anyway, cartridge is out. Batteries come off with the controller. So this uses the standard Nintendo security bits. And unfortunately, it's not real flat on the top, so you just kind of have to hold it to keep everything together. Some things to note on the Virtual Boy, if you're ever looking, to buy one. Try to find one that's hasn't been too horribly beat up. There are some out there that are pretty rough, and right now the prices on these things are just sky high. In good working condition, they're pushing $300 these days. At one time, they could be had for almost nothing. To be honest with you, I think the original price on these was $149, and I remember as a kid, going to K&B Toys and looking at them on the stand, thinking, why do I want a game system with red lenses? And they were clearanced for $49, which is just amazing. The games were a few dollars a piece. It was almost a joke. But now, because of that, they have become very collectible and very sought after. Like I was saying, you're going to expect to pay, $300 for a very clean one with maybe a couple games and a nice controller. Also, some of the games have become quite collectible. And what's funny is 2 of the 3 most expensive games are just awful games. So if you're a collector, the 3 games you're going to want to look out for is, one is Jack Brothers, which is actually a very fun game. It's an overhead view. It's an overhead view dungeon crawler. It's a couple of the characters are the ghosts or the demons from the Persona game series. One of the other expensive ones is Waterworld, which is a movie game from the old Kevin Costner Waterworld movie. And it's just an awful game. You're going to pay $200, $250 for a loose copy. And there's 3D Tetris. You pay about $150 right now for that one as a loose game, not a complete in box or anything. And that one's pretty good. But the Waterworld is just awful. This one. Jack Brothers is probably the most expensive. A USA copy, a loose one, expect to pay $400 plus for it. Most of the other games could be had for around $50 or less. As a matter of fact, some of them are downright inexpensive. Baseball, there's a baseball game that you could probably get still for about $20 in the box brand new. They made a lot of them. It was an original release game. Okay, so we're in it. So, here we go. Here's our main processor, our cartridge slot, the audio board, the joystick board, and the, matter of fact, this is the port to go between 2 consoles. They never released a game as a 2-player game because it was on the shelf for so long, and they never commercially made the link cable available, which I always found amusing. These are your stereo speakers. They just kind of sit in there like that. So from here, you can see our ribbon cable and the array. So the array's here. Here's the cable. They put a standard connector up top that just pulls out. And this cable still looks like it's in pretty good shape. The problem is, as you can see, the tunnel moves in and out. The cable basically just separates from the top. Matter of fact, on this one, this is the glue, this strip here that should have been holding this cable way up like that. So I'm assuming the other one's going to be just as bad. Like I said, we'll fix both sides. So this is all the further we need to get into this. So we've got Torx bits and some very small Phillips. So we can remove these Phillips first. Let's see, is this one small enough? Yeah, we're good. And this one has a small ground strap on it. Come here. There we go. And here's our array. Let's just set this aside for a moment. So this is what we're going to be working on. And as you can see, it's not a standard screen. It's just a strip of LEDs. And the way this works is inside the tunnel. I think we could probably get a bit of a shot here. Inside here, there are two mirrors, one here and one here. And those oscillate. So when you fire this up, you literally hear a vibration. And what it is, it's something called a galvanometer, which is a driver that's just not used very much anymore. So this array makes a straight line in the video. The mirror oscillating back and forth scans it. So that's actually how it works. So that mirror and the changing LEDs have to line up to project an image into the back of your eye. So it's really a very complex and interesting system. And it should have gotten more credit. Engineering-wise, this is a great machine. It's probably one of the first 32-bit systems out on the market. It's just the public didn't appreciate it because they don't realize that this machine, to make the 3D, has to draw two separate images. And it has to process two separate images while you're playing the game. So although it's a 32-bit machine, it was only getting 16-bit processing per screen. And since it was only red, of course it didn't get any love. This originally was going to be color, but the price was going to be too high. So let's talk about this array. If you look on the internet, there's going to be a bunch of different ways to fix it. There's one group that has actually gotten a new ribbon cable made, and they solder an end onto this. It's probably one of the best ways to do it, although it's not very cost effective. But unfortunately, one of the ways that you'll see a lot of people doing is they'll put this in a toaster oven. They'll kind of wrap it with foil. They'll put a little weight and a little clamp on it, and they bake the thing. The problem is that is a plastic lens, and that array is micro soldered onto the board. If you get this hot enough to basically reset the glue, you're going to destroy that. People get lucky. They get it to work. Some other people have suggested using the tip of a soldering iron. This one's cold right now. And just coming across and gently working across. And that actually does work. The problem is the heat on a soldering iron is a little high, even under a controlled setting. And while you do kind of melt and refresh the glue under there, it does have a tendency of melting the ribbon, the plastic of the ribbon. Another way is some people have come in with a soldering iron, they just touch the tips and they work their way down and they purposely melt maybe a quarter of this section to try to reconnect the traces. And they'll actually touch a little solder down there, and if you've got a good steady hand, you can get that to work. Now, my method. I don't see too many people talking about it or using it, but what I like to use is a sealing iron. Basically just a small iron, like a clothes iron. You could use a clothes iron, it's just a little bulky. You can kind of control the heat with this. You can get it to the temperature that you're going to reflow the glue or soften the glue, because ultimately what we want to do is get the glue soft and get this ribbon heated so it rebonds with the connections on the board. And that's it. So this, even after it gets hot, it's not going to be so hot that it's going to melt the plastic, but it is hot enough that it can reset the glue. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn off the cameras for a minute. We're going to let that heat up, and then I'll come back and I'll show the technique. And it's more or less just an ironing technique. This glue will be rebonded, and then we can check it back again on our console. So I'll be back after things get warmed up. Okay, our iron's nice and warm. Now, like I was saying, we're just going to use the tip of the sealing iron. We're just going to work across these contacts and kind of work the ribbon back down into the glue. You can support it however you want. You know, sometimes I'll set it on a solder spool if you got one that's big enough to hold it, or you know, you can hold it by hand, then you can tell how hot it's getting. But either way will work. We'll start by hand, and we'll just come across here and just iron it back down. Pretty much just like that. Just give it a minute to cool. I don't have my IR thermometer up here. I'll try to get a reading on the temperature of the iron, and I'll put it down in the description below. Okay. That's nice and cool. We've put heat exactly where we wanted it. We put no heat on our lens, and that's exactly what we need. The nice thing about the Virtual Boy is it's technically a portable. So we put our cartridge back in. The thing runs on batteries. Let's go ahead and plug our array in and see what we get. There we go. That plug was actually pretty stiff. We may need to clean that into the cable. That iron's still hot, don't want to bump it. Just set it back into its opening. Come on. There we go. Let's turn it on. See if that brought us back to life. How about that? Looks absolutely perfect. See if we can get it to boot up. Going through the menu. Both screens are nice and bright. That's great. That's absolutely great. To be honest, I have never had this method not work. I'm gonna go ahead and we'll do the other side too. So I'll leave that on for a moment. Now the other portion of this is, even though that takes care of the problem still exists, that tunnel moves in and out, and it will eventually separate again, both sides. So a gentleman named, I believe his name is Ben Heck, and Ben, if I said it wrong, please forgive me. He has a channel over at, I believe it's Element 14. And he fixed a Virtual Boy, I don't know, a couple years ago. And he drew these nice little brackets. And as you can see, it's just very small, very basic. And anybody with a 3D printer can do it in just a few minutes. And Ben was nice enough to give the model out for us to use for free. What this is going to do after we get the screws back in our panel, this will hook behind this board and it will go in to this screw and it will actually support the ribbon and keep it from separating again, or at least help keep it from separating. Now in this particular model, I've noticed that sometimes this little lip here that hooks behind the board is a little loose. So what I like to do is I'll take a very thin piece of foam, I'll cut it, I'll set it behind it, and it adds just a little extra pressure without putting too much pressure on the system. So why don't we go ahead, this is hot still. Okay, I'm gonna take care of the hot side of things and I'll be right back and we'll reassemble with the clips. Okay, we're back. I took the other array off and I went ahead and hit it with the heat sealing iron. And I moved the iron to a safe place so I wouldn't stick my elbow in it because that's never fun. Okay, so we'll go ahead with our clips. So both sides have been ironed, and before I put it away, I checked, and it's sitting right at 400 degrees. I'll post a little bit of the video here, and you can see. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need a torque screw, and I believe that's about a 10. Yeah, okay. We're going to take the top screw out. Oh, the other thing that can happen, just like with a cartridge slot, you know, these pins up here can get dirty. So if you're working on one and you see some corrosion on them, you'll want to go ahead and you know, clean them with a little IPA. These ones look real nice though. Okay, so we have our board out, and these braces are going to go more or less hook the board and come across like that. Okay, and like I said, what I like to do is just put a real thin piece of light foam in there, and actually this might even be just a tad thick, and it's going to fight me. No, it's going to just kind of get clamped into place like that. Okay. This top screw, this is a screw hole and this is a screw hole. That's a pin and that's a pin. So if you get it lined up, and it will tuck in behind just like that. Okay. Now, you really don't want to put this screw in first because otherwise this clip, I know it's a bad angle, this clip was going to cover the hole. But I'll turn it around in a moment. I want to get this top screw into the array, and then I'll show you a little bit better what I'm talking about. Actually, it might be easier just to push it in like that. Hold it in place, and then we can put our bracket screw back in. Just like that. So then, as you can see, this brace is now capturing our ribbon cable using this top screw. And the reason I didn't want to put this in at first is because of this little screw that holds the array in place. Okay, so now we got to put this little ground strap back on and the bottom screw. This one can fight you a little bit sometimes just because of where it's at. It's kind of behind the plastic here, so it's not a straight shot, but it always goes in. Okay, it's in, it's in, it's in. The last thing we do is make sure the ribbon goes in. Now, our ribbon is fragile, but Nintendo was nice enough. They gave us a backer, and you can push on that. And as from a couple of my other videos where I've talked about ribbon cables, you can see this orange strip. It doesn't go flush in, but you can tell when it has gone the whole way in. It only sticks out about 1/16 of an inch. Okay, now we can repeat it on this side. We're going to take out our top screw. We are going to, actually we're going to pull the ribbon out to make it easier. Take our whole array out. Put the foam in place. Kind of set the clip on top. Now this is the part that just gets a little wonky. I believe you can download the model if you have access to a 3D printer. I believe you can download them straight from Ben Heck's site at Element 14. But they're also up on Thingiverse, which is a site for 3D printed parts. Just do a search for Virtual Boy and it'll come up. There's a few versions on there. These ones have worked real well for me over the years. I've done probably a dozen of these now. I'd have loved to do more, but you know, there's just not that many of them out there. You know, with as many as, or as few as that were sold, and you know, a lot of people, since they kind of went cheap, they didn't really treat them very well. So there's a lot of them out there that are just in poor shape. And unfortunately, there's been a lot that have been gobbled up for parts. There are some other known issues with them. There we go. Okay, we're in. Sometimes the mirror driver control boards go bad. Sometimes the voltage regulators go bad. And you know, it's funny with the voltage regulator, I see people talking all the time about they can't find a replacement, they can't do, you know, certain things. And there's so many voltage regulators out there, it's really not that big of a deal. So before we button it up, we are going to test it. We're going to make sure that both of these arrays are happy still, that we didn't yank the cable, putting them back together. So all we got to do is plug it in, turn them on, give them a minute. I don't know if you can see, but both of those mirrors now are oscillating. I don't know how it will play with the frame of the camera, but so great. And there's no lines and there's no dead pixels. That's exactly what I want to see. That's exactly what the owner is going to want to see. I will try to get some shots of it for the end of the video, just so you can get an idea of what the Virtual Boy is looking like inside. But from here, we'll just button her up. Put our speakers back in place. They just slide down just like that. And our shell, make sure our board's down. Top of the speakers in. Okay, now it's good. So we can just start getting some screws back in it. Oh, one thing also to keep in mind, if you're going to work on a Virtual Boy, you cannot use the bits, the little ones that go into a screwdriver such as this. This is a security Torx that I use for getting into PlayStations and whatnot. You need one with a nice long shank because, as you can see, when this one goes in, it needs almost the entire length of that. It needs almost the entire length to reach down into that. So if you're going to work on a Virtual Boy, just get a set of dedicated security drivers. And here again, I don't care for power tools on these old systems. Yes, it would make it a lot faster assembling and disassembling, but you know, when you can't get a replacement shell, you know, if you break an N64 or one of those other ones where there's shells out there on the import market, different colors and whatnot, but there's just absolutely nothing for this. All you can do is buy somebody's, you know, somebody else's leftovers. And I'd hate to be the person who strips out a screw. Oh, and by the way, if you're thinking about adding a Virtual Boy to your collection, which I do recommend, you may want to wait until the pandemic's over, just so the prices become reasonable again. But set the focus and the pupil distance right to the middle, because I've found unless if somebody has really bad eyesight, that's about as good as it's going to get. The system isn't perfect, even when they are brand new and working, you know, brand new out of the box. But if your friends want to play it, tell them to leave it alone. Move their head back and forth a little bit. Anyway, thanks for joining me on the channel. This one is going to make the owner very happy now that both eyes are working. And, you know, if you haven't already done so, please hit the subscribe button down here in the corner. It does help the channel and it helps keep us going. Thanks for joining us.